Chapter 15, entitled Layering Lines, Polyphony at Notre Dame. So why is this chapter in my unit called Sacred Choral Music? Well, because it is. It's not secular music, it's sacred music. And it's choral music because it's not solo music for one person singing. So with a choral means that you have a group singing. So it's sacred choral music. And where chapter 15 was about monophony, in the late Middle Ages, polyphony started. And it continues on to today, and choral polyphony. And so, and sacred choral music. So what is polyphony, right? Multi-voiced music, originally improvised and eventually notated, is an essential feature of the Western musical tradition. In the Middle Ages, Paris's Cathedral of Notre Dame was a center for organum, the earliest type of polyphony. Organum is a form of polyphony. There were other types that developed probably around the same times, but we're going to example one early type of polyphony called organum. And so it was, well, we believe it was first for two voices. And then as things were written down, we have, we can know exactly then 3 and 4 voices in rhythmic modes, which we're not going to talk a lot about, but it's a pattern that is used to apply to the words. Pre-existing chants formed the basis for early polyphony, including organum. So it was based on using the chant itself, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Very important development in Western music, right? Polyphony. And we have, anytime you have a style period, you can divide it and further divide it. And two of the periods, the late periods of the Middle Ages, are the Romanesque era and then the Gothic era, which leads up to the end of the Middle Ages. We use 1450. So what's our starting date for the Middle Ages? And it's very helpful to remember that some event occurs to the time when things change, or maybe it's many events, but it's easy to remember that the fall of the Roman Empire was the beginning of the Middle Ages, 450, let's say, and then to 1450. And what happened in 1450? A number of things around 1350 up until 1450. But one thing you can focus on is the fall of Constantinople, right? The Eastern Roman Empire, because it had been divided into the West and the East early on. And for 1,000 years, it continued after the Western Roman Empire collapsed. So during this period here, 850 to 1150, notated polyphony emerged because we had to start to have notation. So with precise rhythm and pitch indicated. So it's something that we can look at and we know exactly what they were doing. And of course, this is sacred music, so it's part of the liturgy, and in many cases, it's praising the Virgin Mary. So, what is organum? It's a two-part polyphonic composition in which a plain chant, right, the original song, is heard in one part, while the other part decorates and embellishes that plain chant. So, and then it says, furthermore, a polyphonic composition in which the word of God, as manifested by the plain chant, and it's called the tenor, which means hold, that's what that means, is present in one voice, while the hand of man, as portrayed by the decorative voice, called the duplum, celebrates and elaborates the word of God. You can see or imagine in your mind that the monks are for hundreds of years having their rehearsals and singing the chants. And then at one point, right, it perhaps became the habit where they would have jam sessions after the rehearsal. And one monk would say, hey guys, look, let's meet afterwards. And I've got an idea, right? And let's try this out. And I want you guys to sing the plain chant, the song, but I want you to hold the notes very long time before you change. And then I'm just going to sing some stuff on top of it. And let's see what that happens, how this happens. And so it was, we would say, would be improvised, but later it was written down. Somebody would say, oh, well, yeah, improvisation is okay, but it's unpredictable. And if I took my time to write it out, yeah, I could make a better example of, did they call it polyphony? Probably not. Did they call it organum? I'm not sure. Maybe they did. So we're going to hear an example, a couple examples, right? Again, these extremely long notes underneath, which was the chant song. Could you tell the chant song when it's sung so many notes? Probably not. But it's like the bishop says, what are you guys doing? I can't tell. He said, no, no, it's here. See, here's the song. It's just stretched out. Says, oh, okay, that'll work. And Notre Dame Cathedral, right, in Paris, the one that just burned a few years ago, talked about them rebuilding the roof in the original manner. Hopefully they're going to do that. And they have the capability and knowledge to do that. But this is where the polyphony started. And this was a great cathedral and a learning center. This is one of the things that the churches did provide, is centers for education and knowledge. So you could imagine that people came from many miles to want to be involved and work at the cathedral. And musicians, they must have had you would think the best, right? And singers, and then of course composers, and so this is where it's likely to have started. The notation of music was started here, at the one we use now, because there were other systems that were being developed at the same time that fell out of use, and the one developed here is the one that we use. And of course, then the development of polyphony right here in this building. Likely it was in other places too, because this is the way good ideas work, right? Somebody says, oh wow, I heard this, and this is really cool, let's try it over here. And that's just the way humanity is. Okay, let's listen to this example by Leonine, a composer that worked at the Notre Dame Cathedral. And so pay attention to the long voice. And then what goes on above is pretty cool. We've seen this picture before. Very unposed, perhaps. So again, we just heard that music by Leonine, first composer of polyphonic music, polyphonic, whose name we know, right? And because it's likely that this was going on for a while, but finally somebody was actually putting their name down and had a book of that he wrote that had these organum examples, the Magnus Liber Organi. And then his successor, right, like the next generation, was Perotin. And he, in his music, which he had a book also, he developed it into more than just two voices. So again, you have that tenor, the holding part, and then you have the duplum, which is the added voice, and then a triplum, right? And then I don't know if they called it the quad something, but so it became more and more complicated, and you had to be a much better composer to make it all work. And this is what polyphony is. And so the late Middle Ages becomes a lot more polyphony. And then so the Renaissance starts with this crazy polyphony. And it continues to this day as a style that's often used by composers. But of course, it has changed the style, but the idea of polyphony hasn't changed. When you have more than one musical line, more than one idea that's going on at the same time. Okay, we're going to listen to this example by from the 13th century, the Notre Dame School. This is your listening guide number 3. Listen for the texture here. Alternates polyphony, soloists, right? And then monophonic chant. Monophonic. We use those terms. One voice, many voices, polyphony. The upper two voices highly melismatic in rhythmic mode, and the chant is sustained in the bottom voice. And that's the end of chapter 15.